Are you disappointed in the portal haul for Iowa basketball to this point under Coach McCollum? Don't be. Coach has this thing figured out. Today, Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I have been with you for the last couple of years on the Hawkeye beat for Locked On, and I have been following the Iowa Hawkeyes, well, since my infancy. Myself and Ben McCollum, basically the same age, and when you hear him talk about those halcyon days of Iowa basketball, I am right there with him, and we are going to get into that. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Just takes you a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Well, we are going to talk about the transfer portal. It's hot. Iowa's getting commits, and yet some people are still complaining about it. I'm going to tell you why that is a little disappointed here in the first week of the Ben McCollum era. We'll talk about the portal also as it pertains to women's basketball. We got some wrestling conversation coming up for you as well. John Bohnenkamp is going to stop by from the Associated Press and Iowa, going full throttle, $20.5 million to spend on athletes in this new world of college athletics. There is a lot going on. The transfer portal, boy, it feels like it can shift, it can change seemingly at any moment. And we go back to yesterday on Tuesday. Well, throughout the course of most of the day, it felt like Pryce Sanford was going to be a Nebraska Cornhusker. There were some reports out there from reputable places that a commitment was going to happen, that we were going to see. He was going to make that commitment, and suddenly he was going to be with the enemy. And then it didn't happen. Here we are. Now, this is not breaking news. These are just conversations. This is not Trent Condon newsmaker, because that's, for the most part, not what I am. But I have talked to a few people, and people in the Hawkeye community. He's very torn. This was something that there were probably moments it felt like it was almost inevitable that he was going to go to Nebraska. And there's other times that it's back and forth. Now, we might find out late Wednesday, Thursday, that this thing is wrapped up and he's made his commitment. But this is difficult, and this has been a very difficult process. I think that Ben McCollum has made this more difficult, which is a good thing. We know he wants him back. We know that Ben McCollum wants him to be part of this program. And you look at him as a player, the growth that he made during his sophomore campaign. I told the listeners that this is, when Pryce came in, that he was a more well-rounded basketball player than Peyton was. Certainly at the high school level, there was more versatility to his game. I don't want to say that Peyton Sanford was a one-trick pony, but it was about the shooting. And that was basically it. There's more versatility. He's played in the post. He's played inside more. I think there's a different kind of skill set, and maybe ultimately with it, a higher upside for Pryce Sanford. And for a guy that has 2 years of eligibility left, a guy that you believe, that you feel is really going to have an opportunity to grow in his final 2 seasons, you could understand why Ben McCollum wants him there. Back and forth. That's what I continue to hear from people. I thought it was a done deal personally, Nebraskan people that I believe, but there are other people that say that this is going to be still that tough decision. Again, this could change in a moment. And all it takes is one word, one commitment, and suddenly it's done with that. So that's what we have on that front with Pryce Sanford. So Iowa picked up a couple more commitments. Well, we start with, of course, the biggest news. Now, it was news that we got right away when Ben McCollum got the job. And that was the decision of who's coming with me, right? Who's going to come and who's going to join the fray as we make the jump up to the Big Ten. And to get Bennett Stirtz is incredible. So Bennett Stirtz made it official. And the crazy thing is, now, if he would have went through the process, if he would have gone on visits, if he would have been taking phone calls, he would have had the who's who of college basketball after him. That's how good Bennett Stirtz is. And that's how highly regarded he was. And for a certain segment of the Hawkeye fan base, because we didn't get that, I think they're missing how good Stirtz is, how coveted Stirtz is. It's crazy. We got to pull ourselves back sometimes. And we have to exactly think of where we are and how we got here and how we're seeing Bennett Stirtz, who's going to have an opportunity to be a preseason All-Big Ten guy, is going to be maybe honorable mention to All-American going into the year. That's what you have. And yet people are freaking out. While Indiana's only got a couple of commitments. And Darren DeVries had a weak head start. Minnesota has just got one commitment with their new coaching staff with Nico Medved. Let the guy do his work. Ben McCollum is not going to race to be first, a race to fill up his roster. He's going to do it right, and he's going to pick and choose. So Cale Combs comes in. Nice bench piece. Is Cale Combs going to be a guy that is going to light the world on fire? No. But he knows the system. And go back and remember the success that McCollum had in year number 1 at Drake, bringing in a completely new roster, bringing in guys moving from the Division II level up to the Missouri Valley. And people thought he was nuts. This is never going to work. You can't make that jump. You can't do it with that volume. Yeah, maybe a guy, maybe a couple of guys, not 4 or 5. They did. Is Cale Combs going to be a starter? No. Is Cale Combs even going to be a rotation piece? We'll see. But when you're looking to change the culture, when you're looking to impose your culture and impose your will, you need these kind of guys. You need the guys that know exactly what you're going to do. And maybe it's just in practice. But showing everybody what the standard is going to be. What happened in the previous regime is not going to work. What happened before is not going to be here. And even if that guy's not an All-American or even a starter or a rotation piece, those kind of people are important. And he'll get the opportunity to earn minutes. Now, the bigger of the pieces, though, is when they get the commitment of Cam Maniau. So Maniau comes in from Wyoming, as did Combs, after playing a season out there, went to Drake. And this dude is an absolute behemoth on the boards. Again, because of pace of play, you have to take some of the numbers with a grain of salt that you see. If you're just looking points, rebounds alone, that doesn't tell the whole story. So this comes from our guy, Iowa Hoops Dave, on Twitter. And if you're on Twitter, he is an absolute must follow. Dave is, I've never met Dave. I would love to. I would love to have a beer and talk hoops with Dave because this guy gets it. He goes more than just surface level, which I enjoy. And speaking about Cam Manuel, here's what you get. Last season, he finished 18th nationally in offensive rebound percentage versus the Missouri Valley. 57th nationally in defensive rebound percentage, averaging 11.6 rebounds per 40 minutes in his career. Yeah, looking for some toughness, some physicality, a guy on the boards. We've been begging for a great rebounder for how long? You got one now. Yes, he followed from Drake. People didn't think it could happen going from Northwest Missouri State to Drake, and they did. And the same people are saying probably the same thing. It's not going to work going from the Missouri Valley to the Big Ten. It can't be these guys alone. It can't be strictly those players. You still have to fill out this roster with more. But don't freak out on these commitments. These are good pieces. But more importantly than the good pieces that they are, it is what Iowa basketball now is going to become. What Ben McCollum is building. He's said it so many times already. Listening to the numerous interviews that he has done, by the way, going to have a chance to talk with him next week. And we'll have that for you also here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. But hearing Coach McCollum, he says we need everybody. Fans, students, support, coaches, on and on and on. Need everybody. I think that says something. There's a method to the madness here. Iowa is doing just fine, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. We continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. John Bohnenkamp's been following Iowa basketball for nearly 4 decades now on the Iowa beat. We'll talk basketball with him. He's also a writer for Blue Ribbon Magazine, the gold standard of preview magazines in college basketball, and the writer for the Associated Press. We'll talk with John Bohnenkamp, some Hawkeye talk with Bohnenkamp when we come back. Plus, we got some basketball transfer news to talk about on the women's side of things. A little good, some question marks, and Addie Deal playing in the McDonald's All-American game and looking pretty darn good. We'll do that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with the complete inventory of over, how about this, 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5. That'll get you 5% off your first order with Supply House online, supplyhouse.com. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, John Bohnenkamp, let's talk some Hawkeyes with you.
Sure.
As we see the slow build of the Iowa men's basketball roster, we anticipate there's going to be a bunch of Drake guys that are going to join the fold. They're slowly starting to come on board with him. But what else? What else are you hearing? And the return of Pryce Sanford or Josh Dix, how would you categorize each of those guys in a possible return to Iowa City?
I really don't think Josh Dix is coming back.
Yeah.
And I really am not. I'm not quite as sure on Pryce Sanford as maybe I would have been maybe a week ago. And when you start seeing where they're looking and what they're looking at, it's hard to see him coming back. And I understand. I get it. I understand that it's new coach. You don't know what you're going to get. And so I get that they're looking, but if I would, of the two, Sanford would be a little more likely in my mind.
Connor Enright, former Drake Bulldog, formerly of DePaul. He is now a Hoosier, as he's
That's what I kind of figured that one was coming.
Yeah, because obviously the reason the connection right there is Drake, that one would make some sense. I'll say this: and maybe it's always this early in the year. I don't remember the case, but yesterday you could put down your deposit for Hawkeye men's basketball tickets this year.
Sure.
Apparently some people did. Doc Fuller was first in line. For us, we'll give tickets away next basketball season, but he couldn't wait. So I guess where I'm going, John, is there is a little bit of buzz around this McCollum team, even though we don't know what it's going to look like.
Sure there is. And obviously with the portal being what it is, and the guys that you figure are going to follow him from Drake, the guys who may stay or are going to stay from Iowa, he's going to have a competitive roster in my mind. And he knows how to win. And he knows that he's going to put together a good staff. You can kind of see that right now. There's a lot to be positive about. So I do think by them putting tickets on sale now, it's kind of capitalizing on that. And again, we'll kind of see how this roster builds out here in the next couple weeks. But clearly, with as many players as there are in the portal right now, and you can see they're casting a pretty wide net at this point. And so they're looking for. Obviously, they're going to have to get some size inside. He's going to have to build a little bit of a different roster than what he had at Drake. Just different conferences. But I'm not too concerned about that. I'm sure by the time this is over with, by the time you get into the summertime, he's going to have a pretty good roster in my mind.
Yeah, he'll find a way. And he's proven that. He did it at Drake. And you kind of looked, oh, these couple of guys from Wyoming, all these guys from D2. How's this going to work? And they win 31 games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to definitely give him the benefit of the doubt. John, there's a lot of talk about Matt Gatens, and the door's not completely closed, but
No.
I guess it appears more likely than not that he's not going to be part of this coaching staff. What are your thoughts on that? Gaten, good coach, good guys, been around the block, was down with Pearl at Auburn. He's been around, but
Sure.
from a McCollum's perspective, I can understand too. We're just ripping the Band-Aid off here, and we're completely reinventing. Where are you on the Gatens front?
I would have liked to have seen him come back, and I like I said, I don't think the door is closed, but I do think if that was going to be something that was going to get done, it would have been done by now. So I think he'll find something somewhere if he doesn't come back to Iowa. He's a really good assistant coach. He's been a really good coach. Period. He may find a head coaching job somewhere else. At a smaller level, some of those jobs are still open, which I think he needs to do. And I think that would be really good for him to lead his own program and run his own program and kind of run in this world now that there is, in terms of finding players. And so I think it would be really good for him to find something like that if that's where he goes. But he'll find something one way, whether it is at Iowa, whether it's somewhere else. He'll be somewhere next year on the sideline.
To the women's program, Jan Jensen, how's she doing, trying to replenish her roster? I know Jada Williams, McDonald's All-American, had her in Fennelly. She's going to stay in the state of Iowa, play at Iowa State. How's Jan Jensen's class coming together?
Well, I think she's got a really good group coming in. I think that look was, can we improve at certain areas? And when you look at that portal, there's more than 1,000 players in that portal. So I do think you're going to try to find a wing. You're going to try to find, maybe another point. I don't know what you want to do what you want, but she will look. Clearly there's an opening there.
Yeah. What about Guyton? What happened there? Any of you guys got any intel?
I don't know. For some reason, somebody said this the other day on social media, and when they said it did kind of make sense. It just felt like she just didn't fit one way or the other, and it just during this year, and clearly she struggled at the beginning of the year, still coming back from that knee injury, but her playing time, fluctuated, especially late in the year, and it just felt like, sometimes they're just really good players that just for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. And I think that's kind of what happened here.
And we do see that a lot, not just in women's basketball, men's. It just sometimes fit just doesn't work for whatever reason. And that happens. We've heard stories for years and years and years, Bohnenkamp, about guys that come on visits and it doesn't happen, or maybe something happens on those visits. There's so many stories that are out there and you just never know. Or I remember talking to one of my buddies that was on one of the teams back, and they said, guy came in really talented. Just didn't like him. Thought he was an a-hole. They told the coaches and they stopped recruiting. Those kind of things happen all the time, that it's not just about what you can do on the court. Remember, these are not robots out there, and Bohnenkamp, maybe sometimes we forget that.
No, and I will say this more about college basketball than any other college sport. Chemistry is important. I have seen very talented teams that have fallen apart in January through March because they didn't get along. And I've seen teams that weren't quite as talented go a long way because they did like each other and they worked together and did some things. Chemistry means so much in this game right now. And if there is just that one player that doesn't fit, okay, that person's probably going to go somewhere else. And I think when you look at the portal,
Hey, one final thing for you back on the Hawkeye front. Iowa baseball, all right, got to win against a bad Bradley team in a midweek game, but they're starting to hit the ball a little bit. Still a lot of work to be done to become an NCAA tournament team, but what do you see out of this baseball team? Not a lot of expectations coming into the year, and they sit in first place in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and they've gotten really good starting pitching. Again, the bullpen has been kind of shaky at times, but they can hit the ball. And they've got guys. There's a couple of guys from Southeast Iowa, a couple of guys I've seen play here in Burlington, Cooper Schulte and Caleb Wolf, very good hitters. And there's that up and down that lineup. That's a really good offensive lineup. And you're where you want to be right now. You're at the top of the Big Ten, and that's, you've taken care of the business you need to take care of now. The schedule's probably going to get a little bit tougher, but they've kind of put themselves in a position right now. And that's where you want to be at this time of the year, especially as the weather gets warm.
John Bohnenkamp, Associated Press, IowaCollegeHoops.com, amongst the places you can read our friend John Bohnenkamp. John, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. Have you got your plane ticket to Las Vegas for Big Ten Media Days yet?
Probably going to be one I'm going to miss. So. Unless somebody wants to pay for me to go, that's probably going to be one I miss.
Well, we'll work on that. John Bohnenkamp. Right. Thanks, John. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. See you, buddy. Yep. John Bohnenkamp as we check in on Iowa.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. No, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. Look, I'm a small business owner. I'm an independent contractor, and being self-employed, money coming in from different avenues, all kinds of different places, and it's an all-in-one convenience. That's what I love about it. Instead of juggling all kinds of different apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You know, you don't want to get on the bad list at home. No, you can do this with Monarch Money. Track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code It's Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code Locked On College for half off your first year. monarchmoney.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Trent kind of back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Happy to have you aboard with us here as we talk all things Hawkeyes. Wrapping things up, and a couple of other news and notes that we need to get into. We talked a little bit there with John Bohnenkamp about it. Jada Williams, who took a visit to Iowa and ended up committing to Iowa State. So when Jeff Linder, who's been on the Iowa beat for a long time, very well connected on the women's basketball front, he mentioned, I think it was Tuesday evening, I think we talked about this maybe on yesterday's show, but regardless, when he tweeted out, don't think it's going to happen, it wasn't going to happen. Fit, moving on, maybe a different prospect that they like better. Who knows the reason? I don't right now, but what I can tell you is with whatever coaching staff, when you have a coaching staff and when they make that kind of move, when you see that kind of proclamation from a news generator like a Jeff Linder, a guy that doesn't throw inflammatory things out there. He's not a message board guy. That's not what this is. This is a true journalist reporting things like that. I think it should tell you something. They're still involved. They're still shopping, and they're still going to target, I believe, a lead guard. As we see Guyton obviously moving on. Okay. We can see the writing on the wall on that front. But then you throw in the fact that Addie Deal, watching her in the McDonald's All-American game, a little slow start and didn't look overly confident early on, really settled in though, and especially in the second half of the game. And how about that? We're talking about a McDonald's All-American again with Iowa basketball. That is great to see, and she's going to be tremendous. One thing that I've warned about, she's going to be good. It's not a talent problem, is there's very few people that can hit the ground running like Caitlin Clark did. And the ascension that we saw and doing it, that was a completely different time, right? We're coming on the heels of COVID. It was the 2020-21 season. There were limited people in the stands. It was such a weird and completely different environment than what we're used to, and certainly what has been created on that front. But we talked about earlier in the week. You can go back and check out that podcast. Some other names that Iowa is involved with. Kyle Huseman's another name to keep an eye on. He does a great job of tracking all that with Hawkeye Report. So that's what's happening on the women's basketball front. One final thing. I wanted to mention here today, and that is coming in the report that Iowa is going to be fully vested in what they're going to be able to offer in terms of scholarship money, NIL money, and the way that they're going to be able to divvy that up, the full $20.5 million that's going to be allotted. So all college programs can do this. And I believe all from the Big Ten, from the SEC are going to be able to do that. The question becomes what's going to happen after that. And from the Iowa perspective, how you fund this. So we've been talking a lot about funding, right? With the hire of Ben McCollum, what they're going to be able to spend, what they have with NIL, what they're going to get from the athletic department out of that $20.5 million. So it's going to be about 75% is going to go to football. That's across the board, what basically everybody is going to do. And then it's figuring what you do with that remaining 25%. We know that there are sports that matter a lot at Iowa. And a sport that doesn't generate a positive return, but generates money, wrestling, women's basketball. How you go that route? For Iowa wrestling, they're trying to track down one, right? It's Penn State. It's not about finishing second. It's not about outlasting Oklahoma State or Ohio State or Nebraska or Minnesota to finish second. No, it's about chasing down Penn State. Well, does an extra $1 million help that when you already have a very well-funded NIL program away from the athletic department? Probably not. I don't think $1 million is going to make much of a difference. It's not going to change things and not going to change the equation with Penn State. With women's basketball, now Iowa is not at the upper levels of things. They are not at the level that we see South Carolina, LSU. They're not funded NIL-wise at the same level, but they're also not chopped liver. They're in good shape and compared to a majority, certainly, of the country and at the power structure. You invest a little bit more there. But finally, you get back to men's basketball. And to get this program back to a competitive level and get the Sweet 16 monkey off their back, you have to invest a little bit more. And ultimately, men's basketball is the second most generating sport that is available. Now, it hasn't happened and certainly didn't happen this past season, but you can get back there. It's probably my love of Iowa men's basketball tainting this a little bit, but I think that's where the money needs to go. If there's a question, go to the place that can generate fan interest, can generate dollars, and ultimately can generate a whole lot more for the university. There's a lot there. It's tough, and this is what Beth gets. This is going to be a huge component of the way that this athletic department looks going forward because you don't want to shortchange anybody, but you have to make some tough decisions. Not an easy spot, no doubt. We're out of time for today. We will be back with you tomorrow. Speaking of wrestling, we're going to have a breakdown of what is happening in the transfer portal and the wrestling program. A lot going on as we'll talk with Zach Sako from Locked On Nittany Lions. We'll have a crossover edition on the wrestling front and the wild, wacky, and weird transfer portal in the sport of wrestling. Again, thanks for being with us here on Locked On Hawkeyes. If you're watching, hit subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio side, 5-star reviews really does help us and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. And don't forget, we got a lot going on here on Locked On. Of course, not just what's happening inside Locked On Hawkeyes, Locked On Big Ten. We got Locked On College Basketball for you. Isaac Shoddy and Andy Patton doing great work over here as we flip the calendar into April and get set for the final couple of games of the year. They got you covered with Locked On College Basketball, which you can also find on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find whatever your favorite MLB team, NBA, NHL, NFL, all right here on the Locked On Network. I'm Trent Condon. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.